Right now, we know of no specific and credible intelligence indicating a plot on the homeland. And that is based on the latest information I just received in the Situation Room.
I think we need to address risk. I think we are hassling 99% of the people who pose no risk and still have no means of differentiating. We need to get TSA out of the screening business.
Well, there you have it from the President of the United States trying to reassure us on this Thanksgiving holiday, one of the busiest travel seasons of the year, and Congressman John Mica raising concerns about the ineffectiveness of the Transportation Security Administration, which, as we know, has a 95% failure rate when it comes to detecting contraband, including bombs that were sent through security checkpoints by TSA employees. Let's bring in the panel right now. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard, Amy Walter, national editor for the Cook Political Report, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Amy, I guess holidays like this are a time for some reflection. 14 years now, plus, into the war on terror, and it shows no signs of waning.
Well, and we now have polls out this week that show Americans now more than ever worried about the issue of terrorism. 83% of Americans believe something's going to happen here. I was really taken by some voters I've been listening to over the last couple of weeks, and it is almost as if they expected this to happen. You know, it's not as if they were saying, boy, you know, we're not worried about terrorism. What I was just struck by was how almost normal it has become for Americans to expect that bad things are going to happen.
Maybe that reflects what the president is sort of appealing for us to do. To some critics would say that he's saying we need to accept a certain number of casualties in this long, drawn-out war on terrorism. He hasn't said that specifically, but some people infer that from some of his remarks.
Well, remember, it wasn't long ago that the president said that the United States had shown an ability to absorb attacks like the 9/11 attacks, which I thought was a rather crude way of putting it. But look, I think that the story over the past couple days, as it relates to this war on jihadists, is that the United States didn't step up. I mean, I was really struck by your conversation with the ambassador and listening to the ambassador plead repeatedly for urgency. He used that word probably 3 or 4 times in his interview with you. And that's precisely what we've not seen from this president. We've heard a lot of standing next to the French, standing next to Mali, standing by our friends in Tunisia, opposing the attacks rhetorically. But when you look down, for anything that signals a change in the president's approach to this war, you haven't seen it. And you've seen a number of indications that suggest we're going to be on the same track, doing the same things. I would point to the decision to transfer 5 Guantanamo detainees 2 days after the Paris attacks, including 2 detainees who were high-risk detainees. The president's decision to move forward with trying to close Guantanamo. His caution over the weekend against overreacting to the Paris attacks. A description of the Paris attacks as a setback. Nothing has changed, and I think what the American people are looking for, certainly what I think the French are looking for, is something that indicates that the president has changed his approach and sees this urgency that the French do.
Charles, you have to wonder if the West is capable of waging a decisive, victorious war. You harken back to World War I, World War II. We had a period of 4 or 5 years in which victory was won at terrible, terrible cost, sometimes in the case of flattening cities, Dresden in Germany, Tokyo with firebombing, and then the atomic bombs, of course. You can't do that in the digital age, can you?
Well,
not that you want to flatten a city, but achieve ultimate victory.
But we just learned today that we did not even flatten the oil facilities of ISIS because it would harm the environment. I mean, we're not asking a lot of the president. We're simply asking for what the French president asked for, a modicum of urgency, a modicum of commitment, and it has never been there. And it isn't there now, and it's not going to happen between now and the day he leaves office. He came into office determined to abolish the war on terror. He wouldn't allow the term. He doesn't describe it the way it is. Essentially, he returned to pre-9/11 law enforcement. And he said in several speeches, we cannot continue with endless war because of the damage it does to the fabric of our society. As if, like King Canute, he can order the war to stop unilaterally on his own. Wars end when either one side is defeated or the other side stops. The other side is not stopping. Under Obama's tenure, the Al-Qaeda, which is sort of international terrorism, jihadist terrorism, has expanded to the point where a branch, ISIS is essentially a branch, is the largest training camp for terrorism in the history of the world. It's the size of the UK. It trains Europeans, unlike Al-Qaeda, which was using only people of its own ethnic group, Arabs, Saudis, Egyptians. It trains Westerners. It sends them into the West. That's why everyone is afraid. Paris showed what they're capable of doing. We know they've been doing it for years. Obama has not been moved one way or the other to do anything serious. He wouldn't even hit the oil facilities.
He frequently cites this coalition of 60 or so nations, but the reality is very, very different. The United States has conducted almost all of the airstrikes.
That's right.
Until just a couple of weeks ago,
That's
with
right.
France stepping up.
Right, and I think that's the point, is that the president's trying to make, and even the French trying to ask too, from Europeans to get more engaged in this, to see the other Gulf states get more engaged in this. But the other question is going to be, what is the better option? And you're seeing some other candidates come out now asking for some specifics that the president hasn't done, whether it's a no-fly zone, being specifically. But as we saw this week with the downing of a Russian jet, that gets into territory that would be, you know, very potentially dangerous. So, you know, I think we don't have a particularly different strategy from the president, but what you're hearing from, even from people who want to be the next commander-in-chief, is not a strategy that looks that much different or that much bolder than what we're seeing.
Even if the United States is leading the air campaign, it's leading an air campaign that's by its very nature is weak. I mean, by definition, you wouldn't be able to increase it or intensify it if it was already doing the things that ought to have been done. And if you compare it, for instance, to the Kosovo campaign, and we've talked about this before, you're talking about 8,300 airstrikes since August of 2014. Now, that's about 18 a day. If you look at Kosovo, you're talking about 10,000 plus airstrikes over the period of 78 days. That's 134 a day. So we know what a serious air campaign looks like. There are reasons for this. We don't have the intelligence on the ground, but this is not a serious air campaign.
No war has ever been won without troops on the ground. Land has to be taken ultimately.
Well, in Bosnia and Kosovo, it was won from the air. So it can be. That was a limited war, but it isn't as if you can't do an enormous amount of damage, and we simply haven't done it. Or, as Steve is saying, why would we be intensifying?